All right, so our client StreamYard says we're live. So, assuming that we
Hello.
are, welcome to the Dev Talk Show here on June 5th of 2023. It's pretty early morning. Have an opportunity to do what I think is a lightning hour. I can't say for sure if this will be a new feature. We're going to find out. For those of you that have been following the show for a while, I know you've seen there hasn't been a show in a while. So a lot of schedules changed, and Wednesday nights didn't work. I think for maybe all three of us.
Kind
I know
of. We got to
certainly.
that point.
I know it's certainly for me, and then I think Andy too. So definitely, we're going to try to keep things moving and get back into talking to you all about software dev. But has it really been 2 weeks now? When was Build really 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, the 23rd, 24th, 25th, I believe.
Yeah. So a lot of times on this show we talk about what happens at Build just because it's what's coming for developers in the Microsoft stack, and there's no doubt that while I don't think there's any reason we talk about any other stack, but hey, you got a Microsoft MVP who's been on .NET since it was brand new, and Rich, you consult with customers all the time in Microsoft world. So
Yeah, I've been around since .NET was brand new back
yeah,
in 2002. So that was the first language that I really moved into. That was when we made the transition.
So it makes sense to talk about it, and
Mhm.
I guess it was fair to say that I think this wasn't a surprise. I don't even think it was the worst kept secret. I don't think it was a secret that Build was going to be about AI.
Oh yeah,
I think everyone, we were seeing all the big names in the news who cover Microsoft saying you're going to hear about AI,
yeah.
and we did hear about AI. So it was really interesting. But one thing, and so I've got some YouTube videos that I'm going to bring up, and when this recording is over and it ends up on YouTube, I plan to get all of these links into the show notes so you can follow along. But let me share my screen real quick here, and I'll start off with one that's got me interested. It actually isn't necessarily about AI. Scott Hanselman usually has an interesting talk, whether it's at .NET Conf or Build, or sometimes you'll see him at other conferences like NDC, or I remember the very first Hack Summit. He, I think, was their very first guest. So, clearly he's someone who's trying to be out in the community and make developer lives better. So there's a talk here called Developer Joy with Scott Hanselman and Friends. And he co-stars with Kayla Cinnamon, who I knew of as the PM that was kind of the face of Windows Terminal when Windows Terminal was brand new. I believe as this talk kind of leapt off, I believe that they had said that she's a PM in Windows now, like maybe more than just Terminal. And I don't know if it was saying that she was a PM on any of the products talked about here. I've actually just forgotten that now. But this talk was about making your developer environment the best it could be. And Scott likes to talk about doing that on Windows. Mm-hmm. And what was interesting was a couple new products here, one of them being DevHome. And we got Richard Corkery is with us this morning. Thanks for joining us. 8 o'clock, here we are. Grab your coffee, right? So DevHome was one of those products, and it looked to be it's an app in the Windows Store, and it looked to be something that was kind of like, hey, instead of having to come in and go to a website somewhere and see all these things you can download and maybe get started on, let's put them in an app. Mm-hmm. And then there was a part 2 that I thought to that of one of the things they demoed was like go ahead and log into your GitHub account and oh, you want to check a look at repositories and clone them to your system right here in this app, like go ahead. So I don't know if you have more insight on it yet or if you have used it.
I did install it, and mm-hmm. I'm still playing around with it a little bit, but I think where it certainly helps is that new machine. We always talk about that new machine problem, right? It's and that is a problem that has continued to be solved. If you think about it from a couple of different areas, right? There's my files, which if you're using something like OneDrive, or there's other, something that you can basically save those things to, and then they automatically get backed up to the cloud and behind the scenes, that can help you when you go to the next machine. I don't have to worry about, did I get all the files off?
Right.
That's great for files, but I'm not going to use that for my code. I'm going to use something else for that. And that's where there's a little bit of certainly you can, and we talked about this before, right? How do I check all the GitHub repositories or the Git repositories on my machine and make sure that they don't have anything to be checked in from the status perspective, right? So you almost need something like that to kind of make sure all your code's in case you forgot something. And this, I think, might get towards that, where I can say these are all the repos that I want to have on my dev machine because of the projects I'm actively working on. At least that's how I see it right now, from just kicking the tires a little bit. And then plus, if you're working on those projects, you probably want to know about the issues and the mentions and the things like that too. So all of those would show up in that same dev home space essentially.
Yeah. So I have been after this problem for a very long time, and I can't say I ever got close to solving it, but so this happens to be a view into my OneDrive, and if I just open, let's just open I clicked on the StreamYard thing instead of clicking on the actual thing itself. So if I open it with Visual Studio Code, and then of course I'm going to have to share that just because of how StreamYard works here. I mean, I guess it doesn't have to work this way. It'd probably be easier for me to share the whole screen just for the moment.
Just in case.
And okay. So, oh yes, of course I trust the files. Yeah, that's great. I spent some time trying to come up with how would I start up from a new machine. And so I have this sitting in OneDrive, right?
Yeah. And this touches on the third piece that we didn't get into, right? So there's your files, your projects, and then how do I work? Exactly.
Right. Your applications. And so I started down this path doing it as a README file, thinking like, oh, I could eventually just leave it in GitHub because it's easy to look at Markdown there, or maybe I could put it in a gist. And so we may have even done a show on this where we talked about Chocolatey Startup. I know I did a video on it where I basically just said, hey, look, here's how I start my machine. And as you can see, I have like this Choco installs, and then you can, and Winget's starting to come in here, right? Yep. And this is I don't think I've touched this file for a while. And one of the things that came out of that talk for me was that Winget seems to have, there seems to be some focus on this from the Winget team, and that you can basically say two ways that I saw it was, one is you can ask Winget to kind of export your current package setup. I haven't tried this, but I'm going to say like, well, I got to go work on another machine, but I'm going to forget something. So can you tell me what I have? And it's like, okay, fine. And I guess you can export that, and then you can go import that.
Yep.
As you can see here, I've been using Choco for a while for a lot of these things, and some of this is more of a list, like that way I don't forget list, but I still forget because then I just don't update this very often. So
yeah, that's the trick, right? How do you make sure that stays updated? And I think that's where the Winget piece helps a ton, right? Because everything you've installed, and I've seen it install or include things in that list even though it was not installed via Winget. So it does seem to be kind of a comprehensive list. And I just used this I got a brand new machine about 2 months ago, and I did this process. I actually have a GitHub repo where I save the export file out to, and then when I get to the new file, yes, I've got to get that file onto my machine, but once it's on my machine, I can use it to bring everything else in.
Yeah, so this list was intimidating to me when I ran Winget list the first time, because I said to myself, hold on, if I'm paving my machine, I'm not sure I want everything.
Right.
I found it interesting that it picked up like, oh, it picked up some games I've installed. That's cool. It picked up Battle.net, but we're all going to be different. And some of us are going to say, I will pick and choose when I want to reinstall a game. Like if I'm not going to play it for a while, then I'll do that later. But hey, you know what? Oh yeah, that's right. I always do forget about some of these things, and so it's interesting here to think about, like, maybe I would go through this list and say, yeah, let me make sure that I've got everything that I was expecting. I'm looking now just to see what there is. Did I actually? I don't think I actually installed DevHome, but besides just the winget piece, I think one of the things you were going to say is, because I remember this in the talk too, was DevHome itself. There's like a file format that exports, imports, that will do a little bit more. It's even a little bit more than just, okay, install this. If I remember correctly, that file format, I think, understands Visual Studio workloads. It's something that I really do want to play with and try when we're back together, because I will admit I've gotten very good at navigating this. I'm not going to say that's a skill I was looking for.
Right.
You know, you get good at it. Okay, great. I can navigate the installer. I can come in here, quickly modify. And I kind of know which workloads I want. And then I know that if I always want another workload, it's very easy to come back here and add. But I also know that every Visual Studio install, I tend to come in and hit this F# desktop language support because it's usually unchecked. And then there's other things that I'll drop in here and do. And I'll say, hey, let me just make sure I don't want any of these out of support.nets, not on my personal machine. That's not always be the case at work, but
Right.
I certainly don't want it there. And I tend to just say, like, listen, I'll take one SDK, but the rest, let's just use targeting packs. There may be a very good reason. Well, actually, no, I think I only have one SDK installed for .NET Framework, which, again, personal machine, don't use a whole lot. At work, probably use a lot more. The bad thing is, though, is that I'm actually running through here going like, hold on, there's another one I like, this one, and then there's another, and it's like, that stinks. I wish, can you just remember for me? And so, I think that's the point.
Yeah, there's definitely that configuration, and the file is different. It's actually a YAML file as opposed to being a JSON.
Okay, that's right.
That we have in the winget side. And I have not played around with it other than to know that the having watched that video as well, new machine, how do I get up and running quickly? And that configuration file not only installs the apps, but I think, as you mentioned, starts to put some of the the personal settings related to those particular applications. Now, I don't know if this is something that can be, we used to do it for the Office side, and I thought Visual Studio had them too. There was like a transform file where you could almost select the individual components of that application and have those get installed. And I don't know if that's a possibility or that's what the configuration YAML is going to provide to us. I haven't dug into it yet.
Yeah, there has for a very long time been an answer file of sorts for Visual Studio, and it's kind of painful. If you're a corporate install, I understand why taking the time is helpful. For a period of time, I worked at Aetna, and part of my job there was to kind of be the .NET Microsoft platform guru. So I was working specifically with IT there. When I say IT, like, this is Aetna, so huge. But it was the section of IT whose job it was to say, when we have a developer and they want Visual Studio, what goes on the machine. And so I kind of came up with what I thought was a good starting point for them, which was more than they wanted to install, but I thought kind of represented both the past and where the company wanted to go. And you do have to create this big, like, image thing, and then testing it was kind of painful. So, if you can get it to where it feels, we talk a lot about infrastructure as code. If you can kind of get to like environment as code, that's kind of cool. And again, there's varying levels of this. I think there's varying levels of this. There's the command line winget, or if you're in Linux, whether you're using like Yum or APT or whatever package managers, you got Brew over on the Mac side. Like, those are great. Living at command line is great, especially if you're a developer. But there are just some tools that are they're what I like to call them sharp tools, and they're GUIs. Let's just be honest. That's what they are, and it's because in some cases you can get some work done quickly just by having an interface help you. Whoops! Oh, I didn't mean to start this. So this was our show we did recently when we said, hey, let's see if we can have ChatGPT help us start in the XNA mono game framework, which was inspired by XNA, and let's see if we can get it to do the spinning cube. Well, I'm a big fan of Scott Hanselman. I really am. And I'm sure he would have reached out to me if he said, I'm inspired by the show you and Rich did. Ideas don't live in a vacuum. I'm sure he came up with this idea all on his own. Did you see this one?
The one with I have not watched this one yet. No,
yes.
This is on the list.
Yes. So I recommend to everybody watch this. It's a lot of fun. Scott, of course, having fun getting ChatGPT to build a game, and he went farther than I did. He built the darn game. And Mark Russinovich is there to explain neural networks and AI with slides along the way. So I stopped on a slide just because I thought it made a little more sense of here's where Mark is saying, hey, look, here's how neural networks work. And it turns out, look how big they're getting, like ChatGPT 3, 175 billion nodes. And I think he's got another slide where he talks about what's come now. And the numbers get so big that our brains, like when somebody says 1.5 billion, I'm impressed. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of nodes. And then they go, well, 175 billion. And I go, am I supposed to be 100 times more impressed? I mean, I guess I am. And now the numbers are so big now that I'm just trying to tell my brain, like, just imagine it's inconceivable what's being able to be built now. It's all over. I, for one, welcome our new AI overlords. Like, that's it, and I'm sure that that's not going to be the case. But
right.
It's very interesting that they basically got ChatGPT to build both the front end and back end of this application. They had to make little tweaks now and then, I think, to make it work. But I'm pretty sure at the very end, they really did have spaceships. I'm not sure if I'm going to get to them. And what was really interesting about it is that Scott tried very hard to get the game up and get the address out of the address bar. And of course, before you knew it, people probably from all over the world were joining the game and shooting at asteroids. And he was even saying, like, hey, let me get this off of here so we don't get, and then boom, 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 boom.
That's all it takes.
That's all it takes. 1 second. We all have pause. So, thank you, Scott. I don't mean this. I'm not being facetious at all. Thank you for taking that idea, which I'm sure all on your own, and ran with it all the way to the end, which I was too afraid to do. And he did it. So awesome. That's fantastic. And it really is a lot of fun. So, those were two that I really, really enjoyed.
Yeah, it's definitely on the list I've not had with all of the other things that I'm trying to get up to speed on for having conversations with customers around. This has not made it to the top of the playlist yet, but I did hear that the basis of it was building their asteroid app, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was pretty neat. And so there's a lot of other great stuff that I think will make for great shows. What's new in C# 12. I think I've seen these two doing this talk maybe for a decade now, when it comes to languages and what's coming. So it's just great to see. Yeah. I didn't know Jeff was in here. I'll be fair, I haven't watched this talk. I want to, but Mads and Dustin, it's kind of like, oh, it's the Mads and Dustin talk telling us what's happening in C# 12. That's great. Have not gotten to watch it. I always love seeing anytime Mads Christensen takes the stage, because he always makes me realize how much I wished my IDE did, like how much more I wish it could do. And it just so happens that he has been evangelizing Visual Studio extensions forever. And he always comes up with the coolest ideas. Like, I think before it was cool, he had color pickers built right into your CSS files and an extension, and then it's built into the platform now, and it's also built into Visual Studio Code and all that. And so I have not watched this. I want to watch it. I think it would be a very interesting one to watch, and then maybe do like a lab at philly.net, show some people this stuff, show people this talk.
Yeah.
I always love, if I see Damian Edwards and David Fowler on stage, it takes me back to the first time they showed Signal R and basically launched, I'll be honest, launched me towards Microsoft MVP, because it was the topic. I took many topics I was speaking about them, but this was a topic I really hammered on for a couple years. And so and it was the thing I always wished I could do on the web. I knew you could if you really put a lot of effort in, and they basically turned it into a library. And so, that's not what this talk is about. I believe that what's going to be big, quote unquote, like a laser. Damien's been focused on performance, I think, since .NET V. It was called .NET V Next, and then .NET Core, .NET, and the idea of native compilation. It's the kind of thing where about 3 or 4 years ago they started talking about it, and now I'm starting to feel like, maybe it's getting there. Very interesting. So
when you say native compilation, what is that?
Yeah. So .NET Native has been a topic for, I want to say it's been 4 or 5 years. The idea of saying, hey, .NET is a JITted runtime, just meaning that like other runtimes, it's not the only one. We have many languages that run in runtimes. And so, but .NET specifically is just in time compiled. Theoretically, to the point, I know this isn't how it actually works, but theoretically to the point that when you bring up, when your .NET app starts, it basically goes and says like, okay, hold on, what are the classes I need right now, and compiles them. And there was always this talk for years that maybe it could be more optimized by figuring out like, well, what do you need compiled now? And I actually don't know the state of the .NET compiler. We've seen it undergo some changes. There was the big push to Ryujit, which is the current compiler. I haven't really poked into like, okay, how does it really work under the covers? But .NET Native and native ahead of time compilation is the idea that like, well, instead of a JITted runtime, what if we compiled down to the bytes, to the machine code, whether you want to call that Win32 or whatever. And it wouldn't be Win32 on Linux, that's for sure. So like, can we do that? And I think for a while, .NET Native has been something you could compile to in the .NET SDK, but I don't know how. I've never really tried it. I don't know how well it worked. But I think the idea here is minimize startup time, works great in small containers. There are some folks at Microsoft who've talked for a while about what if you wanted to create a very small Linux container, like using Alpine or something. You're down maybe below, I don't know how small Alpine is, but instead of, when we talk a lot about containers being hundreds of megabytes, what if we could get it down to like megabytes? You'd want native compiled apps on there, because the last thing you want to do is do all that work and then go install a big runtime. I think Go, when you build Go, you get an app, you get a native app. There's not a runtime that goes with it. I'm pretty sure about that. I wish I knew more about Go. It's something I'm very interested in. So I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I say that. But like, if you're using Python, if you're using .NET, if you're using Java, awesome, popular, important runtimes, but they're still runtimes.
Right.
So, it's always interesting to look like, so what else is this person watching or being suggested to? And I'm getting a lot of code suggestions here. So
yeah,
we'll see.
There were definitely a good number of sessions when it comes to just the .NET side and the coding side of things, right?
Yeah.
So if you're interested in that stack, I would definitely go check them out, because they're tagged in there, and I think everything, maybe not everything, but it looks like a lot of the videos have moved out of the build site into the Microsoft developer channel up on YouTube. So under videos is a playlist for build 2023. I know there is, because I've been that's where I've been getting all my videos.
Yep, from. I just didn't see it sitting front and center. That's all.
Yeah,
I just didn't see it sitting front and center. So yes, this will be a great one to add. And then I did go through this playlist a little bit. of course, as you can see, I watched the entire Red Shirt. If Scott Guthrie's on stage, I'm gonna watch it. And so
Yeah.
I did watch it. One thing I'm really interested in doing, I don't know very much about this yet, but one of the
Okay.
things both Satya Nadella, Scott Guthrie talked about was, look, this is our AI system is pluggable.
Yeah.
There was the demo about, I think it's Contoso, like camping or something. I don't remember exactly. And
Is
they
that
basically
Seth's?
say,
Is
I
that
think it was
Seth's
Seth.
demo?
I think
Okay.
it was Seth's,
Yeah.
where they basically said, hey, you know, this website's great, and our chat is great, and our chat's based on Microsoft's OpenAI stuff. But when you ask it, what do I need to go winter camping? It gives you generic answers. Well, what if we taught our like privately trained version of this stuff? What if we
Mhm.
taught it about our catalog? And so they did that. And then it said, well, what do I need to go winter camping? And it says, well, you definitely need some winter gear. And may I recommend this sleeping bag? And the sleeping bag goes great with these boots or whatever. And I
Right.
thought, now that's cool. I wonder how you do that. And I'm not saying that there weren't demos. There were,
Yeah.
but they're demos. So
Well,
now I'm saying, how do I do this for real?
yeah. So some of the and this was some of the videos that I did see, and some of the things that I'm trying to get, on because everything right now, while it's announced, certain things require preview to get access to see them,
Mhm.
and some things that Seth showed, and that's an awesome set of demos. He does two of them, right? The first one that you mentioned that really hones into. That's the second one actually. That's related to what they call the prompt engineering, or what we're terming prompt flow. So having that ability to be able to generating the prompt is one of our prompt engineering is one of the important aspects to understand when you're talking to AI, to open AI models, and that essentially gives it context around what it is it should be answering. So when you think about, well, how can I generate a prompt that maybe uses information or data from various sources, prompt flow gives us the ability to do that. So as long as it, as Seth mentions in the video, as long as I've got a REST endpoint, I can go talk to anything, and I can pull data back and use that to basically provide context, right? Help me, and like you said, I won't get a general answer about winter sleeping bags per se. I will get a specific one about our company's versions of winter sleeping bags and why one might be better than the other, right? So that's one model. The other model that he showed was, and if you haven't seen Kevin Scott's video, it's a really awesome precursor to the actual hands-on dev one that we're seeing here, was that Scott Guthrie hosted, but basically talking about the RAG model for building out OpenAI solutions, right? Where you retrieve a bunch of data, you augment the prompt based on that data, again providing context, and then you generate the response. So that's where the RAG comes from: retrieve, augment, and generate. And then what he's doing in his videos, he's pointing to an Azure Cognitive Search. He basically hooks that up inside of OpenAI Studio and does that to get that retrieval of data from their collection of documents, essentially, that Cognitive Search has already gone and done this vector database analysis over top of. So that's kind of putting all those pieces together is, that's how you might architect a solution that's very similar to this. That said, there's also, and I think it was in Scott's video, it was also in Kevin Scott's video, but there's that AI stack now that we have. When you think about, well, that's one model, right? How can I'm building out my own open AI that I'm going to use in my application. How do I make sure my data is in there without having to go down all the way at the other end of training a model? What are the things that I could do before I actually get to the point where, okay, this is, I need to invest the time and money to actually train it. There are all these other things you can do that may solve your business problem without having to go deep technically on training. Where companies can participate in that is around this idea of a plugin. And I think it was part of Kevin's video where they're doing a search for houses, and one of the partners that we have in there, Willow, which does, I believe they're like a real estate customer, where because I'm looking at houses, I get that plug-in of, oh well, here's the looking at real estate in my area kind of thing, but it gets interjected into the conversation or the Copilot that I'm having because I've installed that plugin into my environment. And then the plugins that you have in place essentially can be aware of the other plugins that you've also got installed. So it's funny that part you were looking at there that just had it was like the little bit of Copilot. Yeah. This is, yeah. So this is actually a Copilot that Kevin wrote, because he does a podcast as well. And I think, I mentioned about this.
Right.
This is how he does the generation of the title and the description and the images and those kind of things, is by running through his own Copilot that he built to extract information. It was really an awesome demo, and that got us thinking about some of the stuff that we have with all of our back catalog. How do we expose some of the things that were in there aside from our notes that we put in place?
Yeah, no, that's true, because I think, not that we have a huge problem, but I think that some podcasts have a problem where they finally feel like they've hit it big, and they want to professionalize in a way and say like, wow, we should really have great transcripts and great thumbnails and every guest highlighted in their bios. And I'm sure they say to themselves like, but we've done 400 of these.
Right.
We're going to have to go hire somebody. And now I just realized what I said was like, oh, we're going to take away work from a person. But from the fun side of the coding aspect, it would be fun to be like, can I get this to transcribe the audio and figure it out for me? Like, how interesting. So that's
something
really
like that isn't just our problem, right? You may say,
right,
we could hire somebody to do that, but someone could certainly put those pieces together and come up with the right process to be able to point it at any video source. And now I can do this for everybody and not just us, right? So
no, that's true.
Creating a bit of an industry by putting these pieces in place.
I did watch this. I came out of it understanding that this was not a dive. Although, to be fair, I didn't focus enough on this part where he basically said, hey, here's what I did, right? My own podcast. I transcript it. I figure out the guest name. I figure out their bio. I create the social media blurb. I generate the image. Okay, that's, I don't know, for some reason, it's not that it didn't stick, but it didn't occur. The idea of applying it to some of our data didn't stick, because I remember I was telling you recently, I said, I would love to do, I caught poor Kevin on a terrible look there. Like, that's the worst thing about these.
There you go.
I thought about what is the lab that we could do at Philly.net that helps people try this out. And because it's one of those things, I always had this problem with Signal R. I really did, where there is a baseline to where the light bulb goes on, and it requires you to write both client code and server code. And it always, as somebody who likes to think that I like when I create my own presentation, I feel like I'm pretty good at also having the empathy of the person watching it. And there's a little internal clock that's going off in my head, like, man, it's been 12 minutes now and I have no idea what you're talking about, So I always had that problem with SignalR, and I tried dealing with that many different ways of just, can I get to a place where the person watching goes, oh, I get why we're here now. Okay, I see why we're here now. And it was hard with that one. And I kept thinking to myself as I was watching like Seth's prompt engineering, going, wow, this is kind of one of those. Like, I don't know that you say you're going to do it in an hour, like prompt engineering with OpenAI. What is this called? Azure, the tooling that he used, the machine learning studio, prompt engineering with machine learning studio. How long into the talk before you go, oh, hold on, I get why we're here. I can't wait to go home and open this up. Like, I don't know. I haven't figured that out. So, but I want to try it. I'm very interested in it. This one really got me to saying like, there's something here, like without going into too much detail, because we all work for places and it's their own proprietary work product. But I'm sure you've worked for a place where the amount of tribal knowledge is out of control.
Oh yeah.
It's just, I mean, you probably work for one now. It's like it's like we all do in developer land. Like the tribal knowledge is out of control, and then what happens is you're new, and you come in, and people are throwing documents at you, like, "Hey, here's a cool thing," but it's out of date. Or hey, why don't you join this meeting? Somebody's walking through the code or walking through the product, or hey, sit in on this other thing. And what happens is you're lost for a long time. You're just lost. I don't know what the long time definition is, but it's more than it's significant. And then all of a sudden, and you might even be the doing due diligence, which I often do, to say, I'm going to be the one to try to write this down, and you try to organize it, whatever. And then eventually you get to the point where, nope, the tribal knowledge is me.
You're just gonna,
and you're just you're just now part of the tribe. And so I've said to myself for a long time, there must be some value in sicking a model or however you train this stuff onto like the corporate's like stuff, internal stuff, and then say, okay, can I now ask you questions about the business? I'm brand new, And does it say, oh, well, I'm a developer. So it says like, oh, well, in order to get started on the such and such web portal project, first you need, it is recommended you get like Visual Studio. You're definitely going to need at least .NET 7. And and by the way, these NuGet packages, but those will be installed for you when you do a .NET Restore. And like, does it, that would be really cool. And then, and not just for the developer side, maybe your business has a lot of acronyms, and you hear one in a meeting. And so you just literally go to your internal Copilot, your internal company's Copilot, and you go, what's a VNC again? And I don't even know. I just made that up. And it goes, oh, well, a VNC is a virtual knobby channel, and you can do all the, and I go, wow, I just think that would be really cool. And I wonder, what are the tools that bring that together? I don't know if this is one of them. Maybe it is, but I just thought like there's probably a ton of value there.
Yeah. And that might be one of the things where, because that might be one of the things where we take a look at doing a plugin for, because that is, one of those, it isn't one of, it wasn't something that was part of what Seth showed in his talk, right? He talked about what you can do in OpenAI Studio with including your data, and what you can do on the machine learning side by modifying your prompt and talking to different sources. But that Copilot plugin, as it were, is what I think can give you what it is you're looking for, because it sits over top of an AI model that's already up and running, but it's able to bring in some context around acronyms or around coding practices, or whatever it is it might
business
be,
process, whatever, anything.
Exactly.
I think it's something that I think would be really cool to try internally. I don't know.
I agree.
I don't know.
And I think that's probably one of the and I've been trying to find the link here while we've been talking. There's a link to a GitHub repo that has those bits on it that lets you, start playing around with the plugins. And
there is. I saw it. It was in one of the, I don't remember which talk it was, where they basically said, if you want to get started writing a plugin, go to this GitHub repo. But now I don't remember if it was this talk or a different one. Yeah.
It was one of the two.
Yeah. So definitely we'll have to find that. But, interesting aside about Seth, years ago, I met Seth in person. I believe he was more East Coast based. And I don't know if you ever met Seth before. He was at Microsoft. Yeah, he came to Philly. He came to the Malvern MTC. I'm trying to remember what the day was, but part of it was using. I'm going to feel terrible if I pick the wrong one. I want to say it was Dev Express. I don't know if it was Code Rush. Oh man, now I feel awful. But it was, it was a plugin to the IDE. This was before Visual Studio Code. before he was working at Microsoft. This was a long time ago. And he basically came and he demoed it for us all. And it was really great. He was awesome, super personable, really understood what developers needed. Talked a lot about how like you stay in your flow, because as you're typing, like things were coming on screen to be like, hold on, do you want to refactor this? And it would even make it real simple for you to do without taking your hands off the keyboard.
Yeah.
And everybody could take home a trial of it. All he asked you to do was, could he record a short, like just a blurb of your experience with his talk, 10 seconds. And so I did that for him. But it was funny, not too long later, I saw Seth hosting some of these conferences. And I said, look at that, Seth's at Microsoft. That's great. And he always, in those conferences, whenever it came up, even though he was sitting in like the host booth, if the topic was AI, he was always like, this is so cool. AI, machine learning is the greatest thing. And he would love the interview. And to see now, hold on, Seth's in the thick of it. That I think it's awesome to see this progression from meeting him in person, hosting some of the community stuff for Microsoft, and now in the thick of it, I'm pretty sure as a PM. Awesome stuff.
Yeah. He has a great, I think it's weekly. His data and AI show that he does on YouTube, which might also be in the developer channel. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely search for Seth and data and AI. And he's, leading into build, some of the stuff he was showing was like, yep, that's going to be some cool stuff. So
yeah. So Seth, if you're watching, or if you ever watch this in the future, if you remember coming back to Philly, I met you then. Thank you so much. That was such a fun day. And I'm so glad to see how far you've come, because you deserved it. I mean, you were definitely a developer advocate then. And so to see where you are now on like the biggest stage, advocating for what we can do to make everything better. I love to see stuff like that. So,
yeah,
and maybe like some chat, maybe some kind of plugin will hear his name was in a YouTube video and they'll be like, oh, what's this Dev Talk Show?
It's all about the views, as Andy would say. Yes. I think so. There was definitely a ton, and if you look at, there's a lot of great sessions in there on OpenAI. Once you get past the keynotes, right? And some of the keynotes call out those other sessions. There's an awesome Q&A with the product team, with just taking questions from people in the. It's just question and answers, no presentation, but it talks to, or it brings up a lot of the questions that that I hear from customers when we talk about OpenAI, or we talk about these kind of models. So I would definitely go check that out, as well as some of the things when you think about it from a developer perspective. What does the UI model look like for an OpenAI or a Copilot type interface, right? What's available to kind of build upon that, and kind of where that UI component is going. So yeah, I thought those were some of the things that I've been watching since then. I will say, OpenAI was a large portion of what was there, but we also had a number of Azure development or Azure releases and Azure sessions, especially, as you can imagine, because it's Azure, but focused on the developer side of things. So one of those being Azure Developer CLI hitting general availability, which is awesome. And that does, you can almost, I kind of think of it as the new file, new project in Azure. We've gone through a number of iterations of what that looks like, but as a developer, I can load that tool set either on my machine or run it in a browser, and I can point to a number of templates to go ahead and get started. And those templates provide everything I need from a developer perspective to not only get started with the actual code, but create my infrastructure in Azure, create my pipeline or GitHub Action, depending on which DevOps tooling I'm using, and be able to have all of those essentially be integrated together, so that with one click, you can pretty much, one command, you can get to a deployed infrastructure and having your CI/CD up and running in your DevOps tool of choice. And I think that's from from an Azure developer perspective, that's a pretty cool thing to have in your pocket. You can also use it if I've got an existing project. How can I put some structure around that project so that these pieces can be in? So if the project already exists, you can run azd init over that existing folder, and it puts all of the other subfolders in there you need for infrastructure and DevOps and
Oh,
what have you,
huh.
which was pretty
That's
cool.
interesting. That's cool.
Yeah.
We did a show on this a while ago. It was brand new.
Yep.
I remember it was brand new, and I admit that I came out of it not 100% sure that I quite got it. Like I understood that it wasn't AZ, it wasn't the Azure CLI,
Right.
but I was still trying to understand like exactly what the pivot was, and like it says here, work consistently with things like GitHub Actions pipelines and so on. So like that's yeah, I feel like it'll be interesting to try and figure out what's the workflow look like for me if because I do like to use the Azure CLI. I like to use it a lot. In fact, what's funny is I was going down the path of trying to figure out, okay, you know, what can I do in the CLI to make things repeatable? And sometimes I ask myself the question, like, is the right way to do this? You know, is this a deployment pipeline, or is this it's like it's not quite a deployment pipeline. It's like a script. So is that something that I could use the Azure CLI, or is this an ARM template? And I have to admit that if I compare the two, not that they do the same thing, because they don't, but
Right.
if I compare reading an ARM template to compare it to reading maybe like a bash script of Azure CLI commands, I can digest what the CLI commands are doing more quickly. That's not an ARM template, which is more of like a desired state configuration, which I may not be able to get to from the CLI.
Right.
So I might be able to get close, but I may not be able to get completely there. So, and that's also interesting. I like this tutorial here. Now I want to check this out because I tried starting with Terraform recently, and I only could put one evening into it because I also thought that would be a very interesting thing for us to talk about is Terraform, and just alongside everything we did with Bicep and so on. Just
yeah,
you know, I think it depends.
Yeah,
So,
the tooling is definitely there for Terraform. There's, as you can imagine, right? If you were to do, you know, azd init, you get essentially a list of. If you want, you can share my screen. I could probably show it.
okay. Yeah, I think you have to add yourself to the. I think you have to hit present and then add yourself to the.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's fun.
That's not going to work because I'm in the other screen. No, sorry, that's not going to work.
It's not working. Okay, no problem.
Because there's my dev machine, and then there's my.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't set anything.
That's all right.
No
Shoot. Worries. And I don't know that I have AZD installed. I'm not sure that I do. I don't think I do. I might. We're gonna find out. Hold on a second. Look at that. I surprised myself. I probably do.
Yeah. So you're still in the beta, but that's fine.
Oh, I see. Look at this. Do you think I have to update it now to do what you're showing, or no?
You might have to, given that you're at .4.
Oh, that didn't like me. It sort of liked me, but not really.
Download.
I've had some weirdness. I've had some weirdness with PowerShell profiles because by default it puts them in my OneDrive, and I don't think it used to. And I've been reading a lot about like whether I want to take that out or not. So, anyways, okay.
So
may need to restart
AZD again.
Oh yeah.
Restart.
I might have to restart. I'm guessing. Maybe not though. Sometimes you don't. Good. Yeah. So
if you look at that, the second link from the bottom, right, where it says to view all the available templates. Yep. So if you click on that, that's going to take you out to a GitHub repo that's got GitHub pages here with, and you can sort the templates by all of the various filters that exist up top.
Yeah.
Right in the search box there. And then there's a little toggle for the filters, whether you want them to be and or, which is pretty cool. All of those filters that are up there right now don't have templates for them. So if you look at Signal R, which is there, middle fourth row down. There you go. we don't have any samples for SignalR yet, right? But that's one of
Oh,
those things that, hey, the community, because you can create your own custom templates, and that's all these are. These are AZD templates that you're using to create these projects. You can create your own and submit it to the community here so that other people can take advantage of it.
okay, cool. Yeah, look at this. Especially because I've been very interested in. I remember we did a show on Azure Container Apps, and a place that I got stuck was that the container app wasn't staying alive. But I think that's because of the nature of a distributed style, like a scale out style container.
Yeah.
If nobody's talking to it, it shuts it down. And then I think what must happen is when the gateway gets the next request, it's like, well, now I need a container. Where when I deployed it using Azure Container Instances, because I'm in control of the lifetime of that container, for better or for worse, I could just leave it up, and so it
Right.
could sit there idle. And I know there's ways around that. I know that it's just that I never really got through it. But yeah, like for example, simple chat application. So this is really interesting because I feel like, especially when it comes to like Dapper, Mark Rusinovich again talked about Dapper, and I go, this is not the Dapper that a lot of .NET developers think about, the data access API, but it just feels like, should I find out what this is about in terms of, building, I guess making it easier to build microservices? I don't know. I'm trying really hard not to put words into its mouth because I'm not 100% sure, but it looks like I could certainly find out. So a lot of good examples here.
The Dapper stuff is really amazing for on the container side, certainly for building container apps, right? If you want to abstract away some of the messaging and the discoverability and the routing capabilities of your application, Dapper can give you those hooks to do those, and that's probably, there's a good 6 or 7 at least of those kind of activities that it can provide support for, and because it talks, because you're abstracting those components, then you can almost take your application and run it in different clouds, different areas where you might bring in a different messaging bus or a different configuration mechanism, right? You have that ability to define that as you install your application via the environment variables.
Yeah. Swap pieces in and out instead of, you know what? That makes sense. And it was kind of like, that reminds me a lot of the path that WCF went down, where you build your WCF application, but then when it comes time to like deploy it, did you want it to be, most all of us probably did the same thing, but frankly, you could have it run over MSMQ, or it could run over TCP, or it could be a web service. And that stuff got deferred to configuration, which is cool.
Yeah.
So, separating what your app actually does from how it does it is always awesome. So yeah, that, but no, there's even other ideas here. Like I didn't even know about this reliable web app pattern. I didn't even know about this. This feels like, man, I should look into this. This feels like a show or a talk.
Yeah, actually, and who's the, I believe there is, if you scroll down, I believe there is a related web series.
Yes.
It's like 8 different videos on YouTube. Yeah. Yep. Matt Sokup. Yeah.
From earlier this year too. So pretty new stuff.
Oh yeah. No, it's good stuff. I've watched a couple of those just to kind of see what's been new and what's, how people are talking about it, and definitely worth the view.
So and listen, I totally understand if there's things you can't share, but you came out of Build like ready to talk about AI, which got me thinking like, wow, it sounds like they were saying, okay, folks, this is what you're gonna hear. Well, not just that, like this is what you're gonna need to be prepared Monday morning when the phone starts ringing. People are gonna be asking. So I just think that's cool because I said a couple things to you. I said, oh, I watched this video, and you were saying, oh yeah, prompt engineering and using all the same terms. And I said, I'm not even using those terms yet. My brain's not there. I haven't caught up. So that was cool.
There's even before build, we've been having customers interested in having conversation. I think build just kind of ignited that fire a little bit with all the information we shared and all the new announcements that are coming around that. So I think, we've been trying to be prepared because it comes up in every customer conversation at some point, whether you're talking as I do around app innovation or my colleagues around Power Apps, or especially on our data team or Modern Workplace now with all the M365 stuff, right?
Right.
The M365 Copilot, right? AI is going to come up at some point. So I'm trying to ingest as much information and knowledge around those components as we can, and it's good to spend a little bit of time here talking about that and trying to get my head wrapped around the overall story and where it makes sense.
No, I bet it's a challenge. And it, it'll be fun to try and work some of this stuff in. For me, I'm still trying to understand, I watch it and I say, okay, I love the end result. Now I'm sort of, it's going to be figuring out. So as a developer, how do we fit in? What is it that we do? And there was a lot of talk about opportunity. I feel like when Panos came up and talked about the Windows specific opportunity, he really kept hammering home that, this is more than just what we're doing that's cool with Windows. This is an opportunity for all of you. And I think Kevin was making that point. And so then I say to myself, okay, so what do I do again? And that's it makes sense. This is all it's not so much that I think when you had the ability to start using something like a Chat GPT last fall to maybe help you out with your development work or just to have a little fun with, that was fine. But now it's saying, hold on, there's a platform that you could be a part of, and then say, okay.
Yes. And an ecosystem that you can build things for, right?
Yeah. And I go, okay, all right, I hear you. And when you start to see tools on stage, that makes it feel like, okay, hold on, there's something here I can go touch. And when I saw this, I said, like, all right, because there's nothing against this, nothing against that.
Right.
But then I see that, well, not that, this one, and I go, no, hold on, there's a product here. There is something I can go log into and create a new thing, and then that's somehow going to get me towards an end. So I'm excited to try it.
Yeah. Oh, so am I. And that I'm still putting the pieces together and signing up for previews and signing up for, getting, looking to get access to things so that we can show something similar. Although, I've had some of my colleagues start to take the tools and show some really interesting experiences and demos around just what's out there right now.
Right.
Enough that it gets customers thinking, wow, okay, I see how we can start to use this. And that's one of the cool things about what I do.
Yeah.
One last thing, because I know we're trying to wrap up for the hour.
Yep.
And this is something that we can certainly come and talk back to. But on the Azure side, something I'm trying to get my head wrapped around, because it's a bit of a different concept, but it relates to something that I thought would be interesting from a developer's perspective, and that's DevBox, right? Having that ability to, I don't have to, we started the show, let's come in full circle. How do we install everything on our machine that we need to build for this project so that we can be up and running and be creative? And that's what DevBox can give us. But there's a lot, it's not just the virtual machine in Azure. Like, yes, under the covers is the virtual machine in Azure, but there's a whole, there's a number of Azure components, like a dev center, and being able to say, well, this is where all of our development work happens. And inside of that dev center is a number of projects, and those projects are associated, as you can imagine, to a GitHub or an Azure DevOps repo. And hooking all of those pieces together and the environments together, because there's also an Azure development environment. So being able to say the code that I'm creating inside of DevBox can be deployed to this Azure development environment. And I have a number of different environments that I can choose from: sandbox, dev, test, whatever. And I can pick and choose where my deployments are going to. All of those intertwine with each other. So you can't just say, stand me a dev box. You've got to get all of this other components put together. And that's where I think it would be a good definitely a good show to kind of walk through where all of those things are and how they interrelate to each other. Because I think it's important to get up and running, but I think it's important as a developer to understand some of the changes that are coming in place in Azure that can support, deploying to multiple environments and maintaining and managing multiple environments as well. So it's something I wanted to at least put a pin in for us to maybe have some of these morning talks around this.
There's a lot of interesting options now. Like for a long time, we focused on this show on like GitHub code spaces or environments. Like I love it when it just runs in the browser, but even then, code spaces don't require to use your browser. But it's pretty minimal. It's, get your OS going, whatever it is, get Visual Studio Code going, and boom, you can code to a code space. Don't want to use a code space? Fine, code to a Docker repo. And the great thing about it is they both use the same formats. The dev container.json stuff translates right across, which I love that. I love how it's do you want to, if I really wanted to, I'm not sure that I really would want to do this. I could have a box in the back room that basically Visual Studio Code's SSHing into to do the exact same thing as if it was a GitHub code space, the exact same thing as if it was a local Docker image. Like I love how the same development environment as code technology just transports across these things. And so I think that's an interesting idea now to say, okay, now look, that doesn't work for every organization. And I definitely think organizations often have legacy applications that just aren't going to work in a code space type environment. I don't care any of the kinds I talked about. For example, what if they're .NET Framework? And I know .NET Framework is like old, but fact of the matter is it's out there.
It works.
It's going to be out there. It works.
Yeah.
And this is not, I'm not talking for Rich or Microsoft when I say this. The life cycle policy of .NET Framework is still easier to grok and support because it essentially is forever by comparison to .NET, where even the long-term .NETs have an end date. I know that technically .NET Framework does too, but that end date is tied to Windows. So there is some thought. And Scott Hunter he said it at Tech Bash a few years ago, where he said, as long as there is Windows, there will be .NET Framework. Those were his words. So I'm not trying to quote, I'm not trying to make something up or whatever. Those are his words. So it makes you feel like I've actually given the advice at work that when choosing between whether to take this legacy .NET Framework app that works, it should your priority be, this is me speaking for me and my work, my advice that I gave, is should your priority be to get that on .NET 6, because that was the thought process, or to do the redesign that you want while still in Framework? I actually said, I think you should stay this path. And here was my reasoning. My reasoning was, if you spend the rest of this year getting to .NET 6, that thing goes end of life next November. Are you, and I hate to say this, but there's a lot of organizations that because of the LTS wording that the .NET team used, they now think that means we should only use even numbered versions, which I think, I will tell you right now, anybody watching, I think that's a mistake. I think if you're keeping up, keep up. Don't worry about the end of life cycle, because you're going to have to update anyway if you're in the .NET world. Don't put the time and effort into getting into .NET 6. If you have an alternative important project to do, which I think they do, instead get that done. By the time that's done, .NET 8 is out. Get on that, and you've bought yourself 3 years instead of 1. So that's me speaking as a customer now, who is trying to figure out, how do I tell my own organization how to prioritize? And in my opinion, because there was a worthwhile thing to do, spend the next 6 months doing that instead of saying, well, let's get to .NET 6 just so the next .NET Conf can happen. And now .NET 8 is out. I don't know. Do the worthwhile thing and then turn your attention to .NET 8. And now, why do I feel confident saying that? Because it's Framework. Framework's not going anywhere. It's going to be supported for a very long time, and so I don't feel like you're missing out on anything. And then yes, get to .NET 8, do it next year. And then that way, when you're done, you got a long support glide cycle. And then I'll probably make the suggestion like, look, when 9 comes out, if you can find it in your, just go to it. Just go to it. Come on. That way the move to 10 will be easier. It's a harder sell. It's a harder sell.
It is. Yeah. And I guess that's the, you know, as I could see going on the odd numbered ones, if the move to the even numbered one was relatively painless.
And that's, I think, so look, I actually think the .NET team, although I'm going to say that I don't know if I've had enough experience moving enough projects. That's the thing. It's hard. Like, you only get to work on what you work on. Mm-hmm. But going 6 to 8 shouldn't be too hard. Going 6 to 7, I would like to think should be easier, although easier maybe relative, maybe like, oh, it was that much easier. I think .NET's at the point now where it's not like when you moved from 2 to 3 and you're like, oof, or moved from 1 to 2 where it was like, oh my gosh. I think we're past that. And I think the team is past that. So 6 to 8 shouldn't be so bad. But do you really want to live in a world, okay, because this happens, and I'm not going to name any names, where we're in .NET 8 this November and you still have .NET Core 2.2 code deployed? That's real. That's realistic. It's out there. I'm sure you run into it, and we all cringe. I cringe because my cringe is not so much that like, oh, but it still works. And I go, right, no security updates. That's what worries me. And I don't know about .NET 2.2 because I just can't speak to it, but I can't remember when Kestrel became officially supported. And if that was 2.2 or 3.1, then our friend Barry Dorrance is going, oh my God, you know, because that's officially supported. Please get to the latest, right? Please get to the patch level. So I think that's just me, and I'm speaking totally as a customer when I say that.
Right.
So
that's fair. Cool.
So I don't know. Maybe somebody got a little bit out of that. I don't know. But anyways, hey, this was great, and I think there's going to be more opportunity to do some morning talks. There's no schedule on this yet, but it's possible. I think it could happen. So
I do too. This is good.
Yeah. So thanks for spending some time with me. I loved going over DevBox, and I can't wait to see it. And you said that's something you're looking at. So
yeah,
can't wait to see it.
Maybe that's what. Yeah, I'll let you know when it's ready to show, and then we can figure out when.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Hey, it's almost 9 a.m. here on the East Coast. For some of us, that means it might be time for a stand-up meeting. And if it's not quite time for your stand-up meeting, wherever you are, then go get a coffee, get something to eat, maybe find, I don't know, whatever you like in the morning. And let us know what you like to have in the morning in the comments, because you know what they say, like, comment, and subscribe, right? It was good seeing you all, and we'll see you all next time on the Dev Talk Show.